This is the wood carving that was done by one of the artisans from Tyrol when the Second Tyrolean Convention was held here. Tony Gross is the artist. In 1970. He came over with this piece of wood and he did the carving during the convention. And he dedicated it to the Tyrolean people who came here. Supposedly this is the Dolomites, the church, the Statue of Liberty for coming to this country, and then they worked in the mines, many of them. It was very dangerous and very hard work. You know, many of them died in the mines, were killed with accidents, but it was a case, I guess, of survival for many of them. They had to feed their families.
Sì, il mio nonno, padre di mio padre, è venuto nel 1895 forse. Mia mamma è venuta e mio papà è nato a Pennsylvania e mia mamma nel 1897. Mia mamma è venuta qua nel 1928, a gennaio.
From what I understand, there was no food in the Flavun area. They were so isolated there. That was one of the reasons that I had heard, and she was only 17 or maybe 18, and it was really hard to understand how a woman of that young age could come over. And I think she came with a relative. She left, I think, Genoa, and or could have been France. I'm not absolutely certain where she left. And then she came to Pennsylvania, to Blackwood, which is no longer there.
I believe the reason that my grandfather, whose name was Pio Sicker, moved to Pittsburgh was because he had a cousin and some other people from the region in Italy where he was from that lived around here. I'm pretty sure he followed some people that he knew because they told him there was work for him. There would probably be work for him.
Very dangerous work, yes it was. It was very, very loose. They didn't have many regulations in the mines at that time, and they worked hard and dirty. And it was very hard. I know sometimes he'd come home and tell us it was so dirty that they couldn't even work. A lot of dust.
I had an uncle, which was one of my nonno's daughters. Her husband was like maybe 33 years old, and he died in the mines. He was, I guess you'd say, smashed with a cart full of coal. So he died instantly. And she was left with young children So it was not an easy life.
When you're setting off charges of dynamite to break the coal and break the rock so that you would be able to in turn mine it or take it out of the mines, you had to in turn know where to explode the dynamite so that you wouldn't have the ceiling come down, okay? And the other thing is, because it's coal mines, they have coal gases, or there's like carbon monoxide or something that might be in the mine. And the early times, now the miners that I remember, like my father, they had looked like a lantern, but it had a small little spark inside. But if there was gas in the tunnel, that would brighten. So once it got very bright, then the miners had to leave. Then they would go in with fans or pump the air out. So they would get rid of the gas so they could go back in and mine. But if they stayed there, the miner would die because you breathe the gas. But in the early times, like when my grandfather's brother worked there, and my grandfather, they used to in turn take, and I'm sure you heard the stories, they used to take a canary with them. Canary is a small bird, and that would be alive in the cage. If the canary died, you have to leave.
Oh, there were a lot of them from Revo, from Romalo, from Fondo, from I know the other ones I can't think of, but quite a few in that same valley. You were right around close. They weren't. The towns were scattered around, not too far away from each other.
All of my relatives were all Tyrolean. A lot of them belonged to Tyrolean Club in Hazleton. My parents, my aunts, my uncles, they all belonged. On my mother's side, she had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. And her sisters and her were Tyrolean, but they were very close. So where you've seen one, you've seen the others. Okay, but the brothers married non-Tyrolean wives. So the spouses were either, I don't know, they could be, I'm not sure what some of them were, okay, but I know they were not Tyrolean. They didn't speak the language or anything else. So the brothers were not as close with the sisters. And this is my concept of the way things were when growing up, okay? Because they had parties and they had everything else, but usually the brothers never showed up because they didn't have Tyrolean wives.
The Tyroleans did not consider themselves Italians, so they were not part of the Italian community. In Hazleton, Pennsylvania, at that time there were two Italian churches and 1 Tyrolean church. And I make the distinction between Italians and Tyroleans because when my grandparents came to this country, they did not consider themselves to be Italians. The Tyrolean church was on Broad Street, South Broad Street in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. As a matter of fact, I got my first communion there. And I went there. I would go there because my mother would bring me. However, I moved away from that church and ended up in the Calabrese church, which was an Italian Catholic church closer to my home. I say that I'm Italian American. I know that that there's really no difference now, today, and I don't. I don't need to have to explain necessarily what Tyroleans are or what happened after the war. It's just much easier to say Italians. Also, I never heard the name Trentini until I went to Italy. And when I go back to Italy, I find that all of my family that are Trentini they consider themselves to be Italians.
They don't have a club anymore. They used to have they still have a Tyrolean club in Hazelton, but it's not attended very well anymore because they closed our church and everybody's split.
No, the club is getting smaller because the younger generations aren't really as interested in it. And the older people, of course, are getting older, and some of them are passing away and dying off. And so the club is getting smaller. It's harder to keep the club together and keeping interest in their social events and so forth.
There was a woman that was the head of the Tyrolean club, Mrs. Amelia Braschi, and she was 100 years old, and when she died, the club has pretty much disintegrated. Although there are still many Trentini or Tyroleans in Hazelton, many. No, they don't have meetings or anything like that. No, the church doesn't even exist anymore. The physical church is there, but there's no parish.
I feel it's my roots. It's where my ancestors come from. And I believe everybody should be concerned about where their ancestry is. Okay, I consider myself to be an endangered species because I am a full-blooded Tyrolean. And I would imagine the only ones that are the ones still living in Fundo, in that area, where both parents are of the same nationality. Whereas the Americans here, maybe the next generation, they intermarry, so they're marrying somebody who's Slavish or somebody who's something else. They're not Tyrolean. And I think some of that is evaporating, going away. Okay, it's not going to remain the same because in the future, probably the younger children, younger generations are not going to know what a Tyrolean is. Okay, and they won't even be able to pronounce the name. Okay. I bought this house in 1970, and it was smaller. I had it remodeled in about maybe around 2000, 2001. I remodeled the house. And this land at one time was, they planted the trees to use in the coal mines because they're hardwood. They just take the trees down, cut them the length that they needed in the coal mines, and that's what they used. They brought into the coal mines to be the pillars for the rock and the things. So this part of the village is where they have the hardwood trees. And when I bought here, I wanted to make sure that I got hardwood trees. Up here, you hear nothing. At night, it's quiet. And I like the quietness.